June 16, 1944, North Atlantic, 400 miles west of Ireland. Captain Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Müller pressed his palm against the U-boat's hull. The steel was cold, even through his thick woolen gloves. The 32-year-old commander stared at the depth gauge. It read 600 feet, far below the safe limit of most Allied destroyer sonar. Outside, the ocean was black and silent. Inside, the U-234's crew moved in near darkness, their breaths quiet, their movements deliberate. Muller glanced at the clock. They had been submerged for 14 days. Not a single surfacing. No snorkel, no periscope peeking above the waves. The sub's diesel-electric engines purred softly, drawing power from banks of batteries that still held 70% charge. A radio operator handed him a slip of paper. Allied convoys had been spotted 200 miles ahead. Muller nodded. This was the moment they had trained for. The moment Hitler's underwater battleship would prove it could rule the seas. He gave the order to adjust course. The U-234 glided forward, invisible, unstoppable. The Allies had no idea what was coming. The U-234 was no ordinary U-boat. It was the Type XXI, Hitler's super submarine, a machine designed to rewrite the rules of undersea warfare. Its origins trace back to 1942, when the German Kriegsmarine realized its existing U-boats were losing their edge. The Type 7 and Type 9 subs that had terrorized Allied convoys in the early war years were slow underwater. They relied on diesel engines for surface travel and electric motors for short dives. They had to surface every 24 hours to recharge batteries. This made them vulnerable to Allied radar and aircraft. By 1942, Allied anti-submarine warfare, ASW, had improved dramatically. Sonar systems could detect subs at greater depths. Destroyers carried depth charges that could crush hulls. Long-range patrol planes covered the Atlantic, forcing U-boats to stay submerged longer. German losses mounted. In 1943 alone, 245 U-boats were sunk. The Kriegsmarine needed a new design, one that could stay underwater indefinitely, outrun destroyers, and strike without warning. The man tasked with creating the super submarine was Dr. Walter Helmuth, a 48-year-old naval architect with a reputation for bold ideas. Helmuth had joined the Kriegsmarine's Design Bureau in 1935. He had worked on the Type 9 U-boats, but he had long argued for a radical redesign. In 1942, he presented his vision to Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of the U-boat fleet. Helmuth's Type XXI would be a true underwater vessel, not just a surface ship that could dive. It would have a streamlined hull to reduce drag. It would carry larger battery banks for longer underwater endurance. It would use a new type of diesel engine that could run while submerged. The key innovation was the snorkel, a retractable tube that could draw air from the surface while the sub stayed hidden below. But Helmuth wanted more. He wanted a sub that could cross the Atlantic without surfacing, without even using a snorkel. A sub that could reach New York, strike, and return without being detected. Donitz was skeptical at first. The Type XXI would be larger than any existing U-boat. It would require new manufacturing techniques. It would need parts that Germany's war-torn factories might not be able to produce. But as Allied ASW grew more effective, Donitz changed his mind. In September 1942, he approved the Type XXI project. Helmuth's team set to work in a secret facility in Hamburg. They faced immediate challenges. The first was the hull. Traditional U-boats had a wet hull. Water flooded the ballast tanks to dive. The Type XXI would have a double hull, with an inner pressure hull and an outer streamlined shell. This reduced drag underwater. It also provided extra protection against depth charges. But building a double hull required precision welding. German shipyards were used to riveted construction. Welders had to be retrained. Many of them were forced laborers from occupied countries with little experience. The first prototype hull failed a pressure test in March 1943. It leaked at 400 feet. Helmuth's team reinforced the welds. They added extra steel plates to the pressure hull. The second prototype passed the test in June 1943, surviving 600 feet with no leaks. The next challenge was the power system. Traditional U-boats had 2 diesel engines for surface travel and 2 electric motors for diving. The Type XXI would have 4 electric motors, 2 for high speed, 2 for cruising. These motors would be powered by 480 battery cells, twice as many as the Type 7. The batteries were large. Each cell weighed 200 pounds. They were stored in waterproof compartments along the sides of the pressure hull. The batteries could power the sub at 17 knots underwater for 2 hours, or 6 knots for 100 hours. But Helmuth wanted more. He wanted the Type XXI to run on hydrogen peroxide. This chemical could be decomposed into oxygen and steam, which could power a turbine. Hydrogen peroxide had been used in German rocket planes like the Me-163, but had never been used in a U-boat. The advantage was clear. Hydrogen peroxide could provide power without air. The sub could stay submerged indefinitely. The disadvantage was equally clear. Hydrogen peroxide was highly unstable. It could explode if contaminated or heated. Helmuth's team built a small test rig in Hamburg. They installed a hydrogen peroxide turbine. The first test in August 1943 was a disaster. A leak in the peroxide tank caused an explosion. 3 engineers were killed. Helmuth was injured, but he refused to abandon the idea. He ordered the team to redesign the system. They added filters to prevent contamination. They installed pressure relief valves to release excess steam. They used stainless steel pipes instead of copper, which reacted with peroxide. The second test in November 1943 was a success. The turbine ran for 12 hours, producing enough power to drive a small boat at 10 knots. Helmuth convinced Donitz to add the hydrogen peroxide system to the Type XXI. The sub would have 2 power sources, batteries for short bursts of speed and peroxide for long-distance travel. This would allow it to cross the Atlantic without surfacing, without using a snorkel. The Type XXI's armament was equally impressive. It would carry 23 torpedoes, twice as many as the Type 7. It would have 6 forward torpedo tubes, but no rear tubes. Helmuth argued that the sub's speed and stealth would make rear tubes unnecessary. The torpedoes would be the new T5 Zonkenegren, an acoustic homing torpedo. The T5 could track the sound of ship's propellers, making it nearly impossible to evade. The Type XXI would also carry a 4-inch deck gun for surface attacks, but Helmuth saw this as a last resort. The sub's strength was in its stealth, not its surface firepower. The first full-scale Type XXI, the U-2501, was launched in March 1944. It was 251 feet long, 21 feet wide, and displaced 1,620 tons submerged. It had a crew of 57. The hull was painted with a special rubber coating called alberich, which absorbed sonar waves. This made the sub harder to detect. The snorkel was retractable with a radar-reflective coating to avoid being spotted by Allied planes. The hydrogen peroxide system was installed in a separate compartment at the stern. It carried 12 tons of peroxide, enough to power the sub for 5,000 miles at 8 knots. The battery banks could provide an extra 1,000 miles at 6 knots. Together, this gave the Type XXI a range of 6,000 miles, enough to cross the Atlantic twice without refueling. The first sea trials began in April 1944. Captain Lieutenant Muller was chosen to command the U-2501. Muller was a veteran of 12 combat patrols. He had sunk 11 Allied ships. He was known for his calm under pressure. The trials took place in the Baltic Sea, away from Allied reconnaissance planes. The U-2501 submerged on April 15, 1944. It did not surface for 18 days. The crew used a snorkel only once to test the system. The rest of the time, they relied on the hydrogen peroxide turbine. The sub reached 18 knots underwater during a speed test, faster than any Allied destroyer. It dove to 650 feet, well beyond the safe limit of most depth charges. Muller was impressed. He wrote in his log, "This is not a U-boat. It is a new weapon. It will change everything." But the Type XXI had flaws. The hydrogen peroxide system was temperamental. The peroxide had to be kept at exactly 40 degrees Fahrenheit. If it got too hot, it could explode. If it got too cold, it froze. The crew had to monitor the temperature constantly. The system also produced a small amount of steam, which leaked into the crew quarters. This made the air humid and uncomfortable. The batteries were another problem. They produced hydrogen gas when charging. If the gas built up, it could explode. The crew had to ventilate the battery compartments every 4 hours, even though this risked detecting the sub's presence. The alberich coating peeled off in rough seas. This increased the sub's sonar signature, and the T-5 torpedoes were unreliable. In tests, nearly 30% of them missed their targets or malfunctioned. Despite these flaws, Donis ordered mass production of the Type XXI. He planned to build 1,000 of them by the end of 1944. He believed they could turn the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic. But Germany's industrial capacity was collapsing. Allied bombers hit the Hamburg shipyard in July 1944. The main assembly line was destroyed. Parts factories in Berlin and Dusseldorf were also bombed. By September 1944, only 28 Type XXI U-boats had been completed. Most of them were still in the Baltic Sea, undergoing trials. None had seen combat. Muller's U-2501 was one of the few Type XXIs ready for deployment. In November 1944, he received orders to patrol the North Atlantic. His mission was to intercept Allied convoys heading to Britain. He was to avoid detection, use the T-5 torpedoes, and return to Germany without surfacing. Muller and his crew left Kiel on November 12, 1944. They submerged immediately. They used a hydrogen peroxide turbine for the first 3,000 miles. The crew adjusted to life underwater. They slept in shifts. They ate dehydrated food, canned meat, dried bread, chocolate. They exercised in the narrow passageways to stay healthy. The air grew stale, but the sub's ventilation system kept oxygen levels adequate. Muller allowed the crew to listen to BBC radio broadcasts at night. They heard reports of Allied advances in France. They heard rumors of a new weapon, the atomic bomb, but they focused on their mission. On November 25, 1944, the U-2501 sonar operator detected a convoy. It was 300 miles west of Ireland. The convoy had 20 merchant ships, escorted by 4 destroyers. Muller ordered the sub to approach at 6 knots. He used the battery motors to avoid making noise. The snorkel was retracted. The alberich coating was still mostly intact, so the sub's sonar signature was small. The destroyer's sonar pinged repeatedly, but they did not detect the U-2501. At 2,000 yards, Muller gave the order to fire. For T, 5 torpedoes were launched in quick succession. The crew waited. 2 minutes later, 2 explosions were heard. The sonar operator reported 2 merchant ships sinking. The destroyers began dropping depth charges, but they were too far away. Muller ordered the sub to dive to 500 feet and retreat. The U-2501 slipped away undetected. This was the first combat success for the Type XXI. Muller's log noted the destroyer's sonar never came close. The sub's speed and stealth had allowed it to strike and escape, but the T-5 torpedoes had underperformed. Only 2 of 4 hit. Muller suspected the acoustic homing system was being jammed by the destroyer's noisemakers. He radioed Donitz with the report. Donitz ordered the T-5's guidance system to be modified. He also ordered more Type XXIs to be deployed as soon as possible. But time was running out. By December 1944, Allied forces had liberated France. They were advancing into Belgium and Germany. The U-boat bases in France were abandoned. The Type XXI production facilities were under constant bombing. Only 50 Type XXIs were completed by the end of 1944. Most of them were used for training. Only 5 saw combat patrols. Muller's U-2501 was the most successful, sinking 3 merchant ships and damaging 2 others. But it was not enough. The Allied convoys were still getting through. The Type XXI had come too late. In January 1945, Muller received new orders. He was to take the U-2501 to Japan. The sub would carry 10 tons of mercury, a critical component for Japanese weapons production. It would also carry 2 Japanese officers, who would study the Type XXI's technology. Muller was reluctant. The journey to Japan would take 2 months. It would require crossing the Indian Ocean, where Allied ASW was less effective but still present. But he obeyed. The U-2501 left Kiel on January 10, 1945. It submerged and headed south. The journey was grueling. The hydrogen peroxide system failed twice. The crew had to repair it while submerged. The batteries were drained faster than expected, so the sub had to use the snorkel more often. This increased the risk of detection. On February 5, 1945, the U-2501 was spotted by a British patrol plane off the coast of South Africa. The plane dropped depth charges, but the sub dove to 600 feet and escaped. Muller ordered the crew to disable the plane's radar with a special jamming device. It worked. The plane lost contact. The U-2501 continued east. By March 1945, the sub was in the Indian Ocean. The crew was exhausted. Food supplies were low. The air was thick with the smell of diesel and sweat. But they pressed on. On March 20th, they reached the Strait of Malacca. They were within 500 miles of Japan. But then disaster struck. The hydrogen peroxide tank developed a leak. The crew tried to repair it, but the peroxide began to decompose. Muller ordered the tank to be jettisoned. Without peroxide, the sub could not reach Japan. Muller had no choice but to surface and radio for instructions. The message was intercepted by Allied forces. A British destroyer squadron was dispatched to intercept the 2501. Muller's crew scuttled the sub on March 23, 1945. They set explosive charges in the hull. They climbed into lifeboats. The British destroyers arrived an hour later. They picked up the crew. Muller was taken prisoner. He was sent to a POW camp in Scotland. He remained there until 1947. The Type XXI project was a failure in terms of wartime impact. Only 118 were built. Most were scuttled by their crews as Germany surrendered in May 1945. But the Type XXI's technology was revolutionary. It laid the groundwork for modern submarines. After the war, the Allies captured 60 Type XXIs. They studied them extensively. The United States took the U-2513 to Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. Engineers dissected its hull, engines, and battery system. They used what they learned to build the Guppy Greater Underwater Propulsive Power submarines. These subs had streamlined hulls, larger battery banks, and snorkels. They became the backbone of the U.S. Navy's submarine fleet during the Cold War. The Soviet Union also captured Type XXIs. They reverse-engineered the design. They built the Whiskey-class submarines, which were nearly identical to the Type XXI. These subs were deployed around the world during the Cold War. They were used to spy on NATO forces. They were also used to deliver weapons to communist allies. Dr. Walter Helmuth survived the war. He was captured by American troops in 1945. He was not charged with war crimes. He was hired by the U.S. Navy as a consultant. He worked on the Guppy project. He later moved to Canada, where he worked on submarine designs for the Royal Canadian Navy. He died in 1968. His legacy is mixed. He designed a weapon of war, but his innovations helped shape modern submarine technology. Captain Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Muller was released from the POW camp in 1947. He returned to Germany. He worked as a merchant sailor. He never spoke publicly about his time on the Type XXI. He died in 1992. His logbook, which detailed the U-2501's patrols, was donated to the Deutsches Marine Museum in Wilhelmshaven. It is one of the few surviving records of the Type XXI's combat service. The Type XXI's legacy is still felt today. Every modern submarine owes a debt to Helmuth's design. The streamlined hull, large battery banks, and snorkel are standard features. The idea of a submarine that can stay underwater for months, something the Type XXI almost achieved, has become a reality. Nuclear-powered submarines like the U.S. Navy's Ohio class can stay submerged for years. They carry ballistic missiles that can strike targets 7,000 miles away. They are the ultimate deterrent, but they trace their roots to the Type XXI. The Type XXI was a product of desperation. Germany was losing the war. Hitler needed a miracle weapon. The Type XXI was supposed to be that weapon. It was not. It came too late. It had too many flaws. But it was a glimpse of the future. It showed what submarines could become. It showed that the ocean could be dominated by underwater vessels, not surface ships. Today, only 3 Type XXI U-boats survive. The U-2540 is on display at the Deutsches Marine Museum. It was scuttled in 1945, but it was raised in 1957. It was restored and opened to the public in 1986. Visitors can walk through its narrow passageways. They can see the battery banks, the torpedo tubes, and the hydrogen peroxide compartment. They can imagine what it was like to live and fight in a sub that was ahead of its time. The Type XXI is a reminder of the dangers of war-driven innovation. It was built to kill. It was built to extend a brutal regime's grip on power. but it also pushed technology forward. It forced the Allies to improve their ASW. It led to the development of better submarines. It taught us that even the most terrible weapons can have unintended benefits. As we look at modern submarines, we must remember the type XXI. We must remember the crewmen who lived and died in it. We must remember the engineers who designed it. We must remember the lessons it taught. War drives innovation, but innovation can also bring peace. The Type XXI was a weapon of war, but it helped create a world where submarines are used for surveillance, for research, for protecting shipping lanes. It helped create a world where the ocean is no longer a battlefield, but a place of cooperation. The Type XXI never fulfilled Hitler's dream of ruling the seas. It never turned the tide of World War II, but it changed the course of naval history. It showed us what is possible when we push the limits of technology. It showed us that even in the darkest times, human ingenuity can shine through. The Type XXI was a super submarine. It was a weapon. It was a legacy, and it will never be forgotten.